I was married since 17, endured years of manipulation, emotional abuse, and even drugging. I'm finally ready for a divorce. Trigger warning for domestic violence, abuse, drug use, and sexual abuse. Prepare yourselves as this is quite a lengthy account. For context, I, 41 years old, female, and my husband, 44 years old, male, have been in a relationship since I was 17 years old. He was my first love, and although I had a previous boyfriend, that relationship consisted of kissing and holding hands, he is the first and only man in my life. When our relationship began, I was incredibly naive. He was unfaithful to me before we ever had intercourse, claiming he had needs, and that he could not wait for me since I was still a virgin. I forgave him, and after a brief separation, we resumed our relationship. It became toxic, as I felt extremely emotional and jealous due to my insecurities, while he was very manipulative and controlling. Just to provide context, I was still in high school when he first struck me hard enough to give me a black eye. This occurred after I questioned him in front of his friends about why he had not made time to visit. Eventually, he moved to the United Kingdom, and after a year of long distance, I left university to be with him. We lived in a shared house, and our troubles persisted. Arguments were constant, often escalating to violence. There was an instance when I jumped out of a window in an attempt to reach the police station, although I ultimately did not follow through. Another time, an older housemate touched me inappropriately, and my husband remained silent about it, as that man was his supervisor at work, telling me to simply tolerate it. After a few years in the UK, we returned home to visit and unexpectedly got married, even though I had planned to break up before our holiday. Meanwhile, my sister had moved to the UK and was the only person willing to confront him when he would become angry. We lived in shared accommodations with his brother, my sister-in-law, and others. However, when he would lose his temper, the other housemates would act as if nothing was happening, and no one would step in or call the authorities. We have one child, 15 years old, male, and despite my attempts, I suffered a miscarriage and could not conceive again. He was not very involved in raising our son, claiming that when he was younger, he could not engage much. The child was young and would participate more as he grew up and could do things together. One evening when my son was 3, we had an argument, and I became so frightened that he would harm me. He began locking doors and drawing curtains, that I seized the first opportunity to flee, running out of the house in my nightgown. I approached a stranger and asked them to call the police because I feared for my life due to his anger. The police arrived and took him away for the night. I then packed a bag, took my child, and went to a refuge shelter. I managed to escape, and for a time I had no contact with him. However, after a few weeks, he discovered my location and came to take us home, promising that everything would be all right. At the time, I realized this was a tactic to avoid police charges, and I did not understand that it was love bombing. I thought he would keep his promises and change, believing we would eventually become the happy family I had always desired. Upon returning from the refuge, I learned that he had been unfaithful to me with my best female friend while I was in the shelter during the few weeks when he did not even care to see our child. I forgave him again, although he never confessed. Instead, I discovered a second phone containing messages, which he denied. I did not want to deprive my child of his father, and the stress of being at the refuge made me unwilling to put either myself or my child through that experience once more. Throughout the years, he has emotionally cheated numerous times, as I learned from messages on his phone. Called me every derogatory name upon my gaining weight, even stating in front of my sister that he would kneel and cut his throat if he were me due to my appearance, which he found intolerable. Drugged me without my knowledge and engaged in sexual acts with me when I was unwilling to participate in his sexual fantasies. He informed me of this afterwards. Treated my parents poorly, blaming them for every issue we faced with a house we built back home with the hope of returning. Eventually, we opted to sell the house and cut our losses, realizing we would never return there. Blamed my sister whenever she stood up to him, accusing her of interfering in our relationship. Prevented me from remaining at home and living on a single income after our son was born, compelling me to return to work and place the baby in nursery care, even though most of my earnings went towards that. Accused me of infidelity each time I denied him sex, despite my never having cheated on him and having no basis for his claims. He even told our son that he could not live like this, and that my refusal to engage in intimacy was the reason for his behavior. Blamed me for my inability to carry any further children, even though I had attempted to conceive and had suffered heartbreak each time I lost a baby. I now realize that this situation will never improve. We have undergone therapy, but he has successfully manipulated even the therapist. My therapist once asked me how I could deny him sex and expect him to satisfy his desires elsewhere if he had needs. The therapist dismissed my accounts of being raped and drugged, agreeing with him that those events were in the past and we should focus on moving forward. He no longer physically assaults me, has ceased drinking, has become quite fit, and views himself as a desirable partner. Previously, I considered remaining in the marriage, as it was not as damaging as it had been in the past. However, we still have ongoing conflicts whenever I refuse him sex or when things do not go his way. I had planned to wait until my son completed college, but I can no longer tolerate this situation. I did not request him to make any changes such as losing weight or quitting drinking. All I wanted was to be heard, appreciated, and loved. My son often insists that we should not divorce and asks why I cannot just comply with his father's wishes to maintain the peace. My son has become so overwhelmed by our frequent arguments that he has begun to speak about dying, prompting me to seek counseling for him. He had received therapy in the past while I was in treatment, as I wanted him to process his feelings, trauma, and pain. However, it did not help him, and he never opened up to the counselor. My son has been bullied due to his weight, where I believe he is just experiencing normal growth and sometimes bulks up. His father takes him to the gym to work out together, but only compliments him when he loses weight. His father also warned him that if I were to divorce him, he would make himself unemployed, move back home, and disappear from our son's life. This is all incredibly heartbreaking for me, but I understand that I can only be the mother I aspire to be. I cannot force my husband to be the father that our son deserves. My son has become excessively self-conscious about eating in his father's presence. While he is comfortable around me and does not conceal his eating habits, this changes significantly when his father is home. His father even accused me of our son's bullying, claiming that I did not prepare healthy meals for him. I handle all the cooking, grocery shopping, and the majority of the cleaning, trying to involve them when we deep clean the house. I work part-time, drop my child off at school every Tuesday. The school is 1 hour away one way, and also pick him up. I also do this once every Thursday. I take him to dental appointments that are 2 hours away one way, as I chose a better specialist for him. I manage all the cleaning, cooking, tidying, laundry, and ironing. Currently, I am pursuing a degree, which adds to the overwhelming pressure. I recognize the necessity of this degree to secure a better income. When I began university, I asked my husband for assistance in sharing responsibilities, but when I expressed that it was challenging, he suggested I abandon my studies and continue managing everything else. He attempted ironing for a few weeks, but quickly quit. Now he complains that this is not the life he desires, as I am busy on weekends with learning and university assignments. I was unaware of the red flags associated with narcissistic personality disorder until recently. I now recognize and can acknowledge all the circumstances we have endured, including the love bombing, but I remained oblivious before. He is a master manipulator, telling everyone what they want to hear. I took a significant amount of time to consider divorce because I lack support from my parents. As my mother states, this is my burden to bear. I was raised by narcissistic parents in a culture that normalizes abuse, and in their perspective, it is not so severe and should simply be ignored. I fear leaving him, as I have never been alone, and he has consistently asserted that I would struggle to survive without him. Although he earns a higher income, that is the only contribution he makes. He is also capable of resigning from his job solely to punish me for leaving him. I worry that my child will resent me, as he loves both of us and does not want us to divorce. He simply wants us to coexist peacefully. However, I can no longer endure this situation. So, Reddit, am I wrong for wanting a divorce now that the physical abuse has ceased, even though I continue to endure mental and sexual, considering that I engage in sex with him merely to maintain peace, as a duty abuse that is becoming increasingly unbearable? Story 2. Trapped in a 1.5-year secret with a manipulative senior, I finally ended it, but he's extending his stay, making graduation painful. I am currently working toward a specialist degree in medicine at a location distant from my home and family, and I have been involved in a highly tumultuous and hidden relationship with a certain senior colleague in my department for the past 1.5 years. We belong to different faiths in a conservative nation. Perhaps discussing this openly will provide me with some needed relief and closure. Prior to this situationship, I had a stable and relatively satisfying long-term relationship of 7 years with a former classmate, which transitioned to long distance for 3 years, resulting in an eventual mutual breakup due to a lack of direction and future planning. I experienced love, protection, and a high degree of security in that relationship throughout most of my 20s, which insulated me from manipulative partners or casual relationships. As the oldest child and daughter, I have always felt compelled to be very responsible and have never engaged in flings or affairs. While I'm not sure if it is pertinent, I am mostly introverted and a book lover with no social media presence. Despite my reclusiveness, I am often considered attractive and have had numerous individuals approach me. This man, who is a year ahead of me at work, became a good friend when I began in the department. He was incredibly kind, provided helpful advice, and appeared to be a genuinely decent person. He had even met my then-boyfriend on a few occasions, and they were amicable. He is friendly to everyone. This individual had a reputation as a playboy, which I gathered from others, but he consistently denied it. He is well-read, articulate, extremely fit, and charming, yet he struggles with significant depressive episodes. He attempted to flirt with me upon my arrival, but I dismissed it, perceiving him more like an older brother. After the breakup, our closeness intensified. It began on a highly volatile note with flirtation and emotional outbursts, during which he would come to my room at night to console me, promising not to engage in anything sexual, while simultaneously trying to pressure me into penetrative acts. I ended the relationship and spent 3 weeks avoiding all contact while he continually attempted to manipulate me at work, suggesting that I was foolish to think a man would visit a woman's room at night without wanting sex. In our small department of 8 people sharing 3 rooms, completely avoiding him was impossible over the next 3 years. I confided in my age-mate classmate about my struggles, as I was having emotional crises outside of work daily. He offered support and advised me to also keep my distance from this man. Looking back, I realize how foolish I was to forgive him and return to whatever it was we had. In my defense, I had never encountered someone as manipulative and charming as he was. We experienced cycles of exceptionally good days, followed by weeks of no contact, all while living and working together in the same hostel for a 1.5 years. He would often display behaviors that were irrational and emotionally or sexually abusive, leaving me unable to process them. The emotional and verbal abuse included him yelling at me over trivial issues, name-calling, and body shaming. My BMI is 19, attempting to convince me of my stupidity and implying that I should be grateful just to be in his presence. He would list the women who were messaging or pursuing him, asserting that he could have any girl he wanted. He would recount tales of his past sexual encounters and affairs with intelligent, beautiful women who tried to win him back. He openly discussed his history of non-commitment and infidelity with most of his past relationships, save for 1 or 2 women he claimed to have truly loved. He made me contribute to parts of his thesis without credit, while the other half was authored by his platonic ex. I provided him with notes, books, food, and emotional support during his final exams, and I even edited and submitted articles for him to various research journals. Yet, I received no acknowledgement. He accepted expensive concert tickets from me and then spent the entire event with his male friends, leaving me alone. He never cooked for me, never gifted me anything meaningful aside from candy, and never took me out on a date, nor did he ever explicitly declare his love for me. He perpetually said hurtful things, mocked my friendships, and whenever I attempted to defend myself, he claimed that I was the truly emotionally abusive one who should apologize. I would cook special meals for him, give him small gifts and notes, and plead for him to take me out, which he never did. The sexual abuse involved coercing me into sexual activities that I was unwilling to perform, followed by profuse apologies, claiming he could not hear my refusals or see my tears, insisting he cared for me deeply. After every episode, I would distance myself for several weeks, only to eventually forgive him and allow him back into my life. Only now, as I write this, do I begin to comprehend the extent of my submissiveness. On the positive days, he would uplift me with compliments and career guidance, and he even brought me home to meet his mother and family on 2 occasions with overnight stays. He told me I was the first girl to receive such an honor, which likely meant I was the most submissive of the 30 women he had encountered. I met several of his old friends and even had video calls with his sisters, who were welcoming. On occasions when I was feeling down due to other circumstances, he would visit my room, bring candy, pick up a novel, and hold me like a child while reading to me until I laughed. We shared dances to random songs at 2 in the morning, watched countless movies and shows together, and read side by side. He has always supported my love for outdoor activities and reading. He confided in me about his experiences of childhood abuse at the hands of his estranged father and spoke about the tremendous effort he has put in over the last decade to keep his family financially stable. He has met my parents on 2 occasions as a friend and has always spoken highly of them. One condition of this situationship was that we could not go public about our relationship within our workplace and city. I was not permitted to inform anyone, and neither was he. Therefore, I have had to withstand a 1.5 years of this secret affair without the support of friends or family because I could not disclose my relationship to others. He argued that this was in place to protect my reputation, as being associated with his Playboy image could harm me if the relationship ended, and because our interfaith relationship might attract outside animosity, which is a possibility. Additionally, he could never offer me a commitment and would frequently call and text his exes, whom he claimed were now merely friends. Despite this, he assured me that he had not been with anyone else during our time together. Given all the painful remarks he frequently directed at me, I am inclined to believe this. He insisted that I must accept all aspects of him and his platonic relationships with his exes if I wanted any part in his life. The final argument transpired on February 14, when I inquired about the possibility of going out for coffee in the evening. He agreed, only to abandon me to party with his friends all night, later calling me late at night. The following day, he stated that he did not celebrate Valentine's Day and suggested we could go out another time. At that point, I simply told him to be merciful for once and end everything, to sever the connection for good. I expressed my exhaustion. He asked if I was certain, and I affirmed my decision. This conversation occurred in the early morning, and later that day, I had to deliver a presentation in front of him, which I completely bombed due to my emotional state, a situation I cannot share with anyone. Throughout the presentation, he gave me pitying looks and shook his head in disapproval. Following that, I was compelled to remain at work throughout the day, witnessing him interact cheerfully with everyone else while he received congratulations for having passed his final exams. He later went on a picnic with his friends as if nothing had transpired. I have managed this situation before with a stoic expression at work, pretending that nothing affected me. However, I can no longer maintain this facade when it is destroying me inside. His tenure is nearing its conclusion, and although he had previously contemplated leaving our hospital, he has now suddenly applied for a 1-year extension in the same department. I have pleaded with him to simply depart and be kind to me just once, but he responded that he could not make career decisions based on my emotional well-being. He has also stated that he will date and engage with other women in the same place where I will be obliged to remain for another year, until I complete my degree. In summary, I found myself in an emotionally and sexually abusive secret relationship with a senior colleague that lasted 1.5 years, and he is now choosing to extend his tenure at our workplace while I am required to stay here to finish my degree. Story 3. After college apps, my sister felt my parents favored me, and I realized how I contributed to that dynamic. It hurts. I am an 18-year-old female, and I left for college this year in August, to be precise. I reside close enough to my home that I return every weekend. Over the past year, I experienced significant stress truly, a lot of stress regarding college and related matters. During the college application season, we frequently talked about colleges, and my sister, who is 11, expressed her annoyance and resentment about the constant discussions. I understood her perspective. However, I felt compelled to engage in conversations about college. I promised her I would refrain from discussing it for a month, then 2 months, 3 months, and so on, until the year concluded. I made my college decision, and we finally ceased our conversations on the topic. Yet, that's when she began to complain about my parents seemingly caring more about me than her. Compounding this issue was my graduation party, where she felt overlooked due to the amount of attention I received that year, first with the college talks, followed by the celebration. I attempted to empathize with her, but honestly, and I admit this is entirely my fault, at times I brushed her feelings aside. I told her that I needed to talk about my college situation, acknowledging her feelings but asserting that it was a significant time in my life. I believe her frustration stemmed from the lack of attention she was receiving. This year, the situation has only worsened. My parents have taken to coddling me. They never really did during my school years and expected me to be responsible. But now that they do not see me daily, their behavior has changed. For example, since I no longer have a bed at home, it's a long story, but there's no negative reason behind it. It's simply life circumstances. I sleep on a mattress on the floor of their bedroom, while sometimes my sister joins me there. My mother tends to wake me in the morning to move to her bed once she rises for work, but she does not wake my sister. Later, she explained that my sister would not return to sleep once woken, and while I partially believe that, I can't shake the feeling that it reflects a pattern of them babying me instead of her. Additionally, they tend to be stricter with her in ways that seem severe, similar to how they were with me at her age, and since they are not as strict with me anymore, it becomes more noticeable to her. The most frustrating aspect is their frequent comparisons between the two of us. Yes, I had better grades than she does, but on the flip side, she is much more sociable and creative, which they fail to mention when they are upset with her. They do tell her these positive traits sometimes, but I'll admit, that girl often doesn't study. She fails to complete much of her homework out of pure disinterest, and then my parents make comments like, "My name had all A's at your age," which, aside from being rude, is also factually incorrect. My sister frequently complains about this, and I try to support her, but there are instances when she erupts in anger, and I, regrettably, find myself irritated and respond with things like, "Don't take it out on me," or "They care for us equally, please don't say that," which only leads to dismissiveness. A moment ago, we discussed this issue and I said, "I'm truly sorry you feel this way. I don't want them to treat you poorly by bringing me into discussions. You deserve better. What can I do to help?" To which she responded, "You know what you should do, you just don't listen," before storming off. She gets furious with me for expressing my frustrations to our parents because they tend to take my side. Yet ironically, she is generally the one who initiates conflicts with me. It has become this endless cycle, my parents treating her unfairly, right arrow. She gets angry with me, right arrow. I voice my concerns, right arrow. My parents become increasingly upset, and it just continues on. I do not believe this dynamic suggests that my parents dislike her and favor me. Rather, it is a combination of my not residing at home anymore, her acting up in ways that I did not, and some external factors. For the majority of our lives, my parents treated us fairly, as this complaining has only arisen in the last year. That does not excuse it, but I want to clarify that my parents are not terrible individuals, and consequently, my sister isn't awful either. She's merely an 11-year-old navigating a challenging phase of her life. I am at a loss regarding how to address this situation. There are times when she exaggerates. For instance, she angrily claimed that my mother wouldn't miss her when she went to college, but they cried when I left, and I reminded her that our mother was emotional the day she left for a sleepover a month ago, while at other moments, her feelings appear more justified, like how my parents often side with me even when they lack knowledge of the disagreement, or how my mother only wakes me and not her. I would argue that things have improved over time. It was exceptionally difficult back in September, but it has eased somewhat. Nevertheless, the situation irritates me. I have attempted to bring this to my parents' attention, and I constantly defend my sister when my parents take my side during disputes, even if it harms my standing. For instance, when they scold her in situations where I did not request their intervention, I advocate for her, urging them not to yell at her without understanding the context. But my parents seem unresponsive, and my sister becomes upset when I explain that I also wish for a resolution. Lately, she seems to be acting out more, yelling at me frequently, which I assume is typical of her age. But since I study psychology, I sometimes spiral into thoughts like, what if she is acting this way because she feels unjustly treated? Additionally, it's worth noting that this is primarily my mother who exhibits this behavior, while my dad tends to be more neutral. My sister has mentioned that she feels closer to him than I do, but since my dad has a low tolerance for nonsense, he often ends up getting frustrated with her more frequently than he does with me. If I had to speculate, my parents may subconsciously favor me a little more. This is a recent development. Until I turned 17, we would have massive shouting matches, and my parents would often say things like, "Your sister always knows when to step back. Why can't you imitate her?" However, since they now observe me less frequently, coupled with my needing more assistance and my sister being in a challenging developmental stage, I am viewed as the easier child, and as a result, they coddle me. This isn't fair, but I feel powerless to change it. Moreover, this entire cycle began during my college application phase, and since my sister started to act out and seek attention when any conversation regarding college arose, my parents grew frustrated with her for her behavior, prompting her to act out again, leading to my parents increasing their frustration, and on it goes. Furthermore, she does instigate many arguments and can be unfair toward me, yet the main concern arises when my parents automatically defend me, often without knowing what transpired. While this does not occur frequently, it definitely has occurred in the past. Honestly, I occasionally feel resentment toward my sister, which is completely unjust since she is merely a child. I would never allow her to see that I dislike her behavior, but I wish she would comprehend that her outbursts toward me only provide my parents with more ammunition against her. In response, I tend to react poorly because I feel personally attacked when she claims our parents prefer her, which worsens the situation. I could simply state, "I'm sorry you feel this way, it's not your fault," but she often makes me feel so accusatory that I become angry. I'm making a conscious effort to improve. When she yelled at me just now, I let it go and told her I was sorry. Ultimately, I do not know what to do. I do not think my parents are malevolent, but they simply do not listen, and though I do not harbor hatred toward my sister, I wish she would understand that her negative behavior toward me is driving my parents to find additional reasons to be upset with her. Then I feel guilty for even thinking that because she is so young, she should not need to act nicely for our parents to treat her justly. As I mentioned, the situation has improved significantly, but my sister often has animosity toward me because when she mistreats me, I report it to our parents, and they become angry with her. She interprets that as proof of my parents favoring me, and while I cannot dispute that sentiment since I want them to support me, I sympathize with her perspective and cannot fault her for having her feelings. My emotions are incredibly tangled. I cannot approach my parents about being kinder, as they simply instruct me to stay out of their parenting decisions. I cannot advise my sister to calm down, as she would just tell me to be quiet. What options do I have? Story 4. Confronted Manny's friend Brad at a farmer's market. He accused me of theft and threats. I smacked his hand away. Crowd went silent. Apologies for the length of this post, but I believe some background is essential. I, 24 female, was in a relationship with a man named Manny, 29 male, for nearly a year. However, we ended things around September, primarily due to his persistent insecurity regarding my close relationship with my cousin Dave, 25 female to male, though I doubt Manny was aware of his transgender status since Dave passes very well, and I never explicitly told him. My father and my uncle, Dave's dad, are quite close, which naturally meant that Dave and I spent significant time together. I would even go so far as to say he is more like a brother or best friend to me than merely my cousin. There has never been anything inappropriate about our bond. I feel uncomfortable having to clarify that, as if I need to defend my closeness to family, but that is the impression Manny left me with. In August, Dave and I attended a Bruce Springsteen concert. We had been looking forward to it for a whole year due to a prior cancellation. Growing up, we listened to his music a lot, making it a significant event for us. Our dads frequently played Springsteen, transforming our initial disdain for dad music into a genuine admiration for his artistry and values. I invited Manny to join us, but he joked about not wanting to listen to boomer music for 3 hours, and yes, the boss does play for a long time, so I understand if it's not everyone's preference. Despite that, Dave and I were genuinely excited. We purchased matching t-shirts at a merchandise stand and took pictures together. However, when Manny saw them on my Instagram, he began texting me in his "I'm joking but not really" manner, claiming that people would think I was cucking him with my cousin and insisted that I delete the photos. I was at a loss for how to respond, as it was such a bizarre comment, so I told him he was acting strangely and that I loved him, but I intended to turn off my phone to enjoy the concert. The concert was amazing. We cried and sang with all our hearts. Although it sounds cliché, it felt almost spiritual for us. Springsteen performed for over 3 hours, and by the time I checked my phone at around 11 p.m., all the joy I felt was instantly drained when I saw his flurry of messages. I won't go into detail about what he said, but he accused me of engaging in inappropriate behavior with my cousin and claimed he would send me to hell the moment he saw me. It was obvious he had been drinking heavily, as his messages became increasingly incoherent. That night, I stayed on Dave's couch because I genuinely feared that Manny might harm me, given the threats he made. You can imagine the accusations I faced for not returning home. The next day, however, Manny switched to saying, "I love you, baby," and asking when I would return, indicating he wanted to prepare my favorite casserole for dinner. When I mentioned his erratic behavior from the previous night, he attempted to brush it off, claiming he was merely joking and was only upset about not being invited. He even tried to lie, saying I hadn't invited him. I wasn't naive, but I thought I might give him another chance. The casserole might have influenced me, I suppose. Nothing particularly terrible happened in that time, but about a week later, I packed my things and ended the relationship, as I could not overlook his unusual attitude toward my relationship with Dave. He had been somewhat uncomfortable in the past when I talked about my closeness to Dave, and when he saw us exchanging memes and fun messages on Discord. However, I believed he had come to terms with it when I invited Dave several times to hang out with the three of us and play video games. I truly wanted Manny and Dave to connect because of how important Dave was to me, but he would still make comments that seemed insecure, like, "I bet Dave couldn't lift that with his skinny arms," while attempting to carry a heavy box. Anyway, I have shared enough. Let's return to the present. There is a farmer's market in my neighborhood every week, and sometimes local bands perform there too. Earlier today, I was browsing by myself when I spotted Brad in his 20s or 30s, Manny's friend, attempting to get my attention. I was not keen on speaking with him, so I gave a somewhat awkward wave and returned to examining some jars of honey, but Brad approached me and said he knew what I did and wanted to talk away from the crowd. Knowing what was coming, I said it was fine where we were but agreed to step away from the main area. However, the conversation escalated. Brad claimed that Manny had told him everything and was considering contacting the police regarding allegations of incest and theft. I guess he accused me of taking his PlayStation 5 and some Magic the Gathering cards or something. Although some cards may have been in my things that I hastily packed, he had loaned me a starter deck when he taught me to play, but I didn't expect any valuable cards to be involved. If there were, he could have simply asked me, and I would have sent them back. I confess I panicked. I was unsettled by Brad's serious allegations and his finger pointing near my face, which felt menacing. I swatted his hand away, quite forcefully. I might have used my nails unintentionally. Brad lost his temper. He shouted, "Did anyone else see that? She just assaulted me. That's assault right there," and kept inquiring if anyone recorded it. He called me a slur. I acknowledged that I should not have struck him, but I felt threatened by his gesture and aggressive tone. Strangely enough, everyone around seemed to avert their gaze, and no one intervened on either side. I eventually left him there, rushed home, and remained in a state of panic for quite some time. I feared that I might be arrested or something, but ultimately, nothing happened. I still worry that Manny or Brad could reach out to the university and instigate an investigation against me. Would it be excessive to file a restraining order against both of them, Or do you think such action could be justified considering that Brad approached me publicly to confront me? I apologize for the lengthy post. I realize I probably didn't need to provide so much detail, but I wanted to convey the absurdity of the situation. Am I in the wrong for hitting Brad? That is the only aspect where I feel I may have erred.